the years, my name is Jan Brown. I'm the pastoral care coordinator at Countryside. I took Margie's place. She left in April. So I'm just scrambling to try to figure out what all Margie was up to. A lot, as it turns out. But one of my very favorite things to do is to be involved with the Stephen Ministers at Countryside, and this is our 30th year, and I think we should celebrate. So for 30 years, Countryside has been funding, supporting, and using this ministry, and what that means is people who are willing to be trained go through about a 4 to 5 month weekly class where they learn helping skills in Christian caregiving, how to companion and walk alongside someone who's having some difficulties in life. It's not therapy, but it is therapeutic. It's not counseling, but it's caring. And it's really the proof of God's love on earth to those who are really struggling. And we all struggle from time to time. So as you listen tonight to our panel, our esteemed panel, I'd like you to consider how you might someday consider Stephen Ministry, either as a caregiver, which is what we call it when you're trained, or as a care receiver, which is what we call it when you are receiving the care of a Stephen Minister. And this is a confidential ministry. So with that in mind, I will introduce each panel member, and they each will talk a little bit, and then they'd love to have some questions and answers. So, you ready? Okay. So Jerry Brown is here. Mary Johnson is here. Lee Marshall is here, Reverend Lee Marshall. Nolan Hudson. And you all know Margie Paul. Also, we have a lot of other Stephen Ministers in the audience. And if you are a Stephen Minister now, or you've ever been trained as one at Countryside, would you please stand up? Anywhere. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. With that said, I'm going to turn it over. Because this is our 30th year, we will start with the wisdom of those who have really, truly been involved from the beginning and almost the beginning. So we'll start with Lee.
Well, 30 years ago, I was in school, like you are. And I was finishing my degree in pastoral ministry, and I had to write a thesis. And so I was working with our senior minister and myself here at Countryside, and you know what a big congregation it is, and how many people there are in church. And I decided that we really could use some help in ministering to this large congregation. So I wrote my senior thesis on how to bring a lay care ministry into a large congregational church. And that way I had an opportunity to look at all the different lay care ministries that there are out there, because there are a lot of different ones. And I decided that Stephen Ministry was the best one for Countryside Church. So Mary and a couple of other people went with us, and we were trained to be teachers, to be leaders in Stephen Ministry. And we started a class back here, and National had told us that the maximum number of people in a class should not exceed 20. We had 40 signed up.
Wow.
So you can't tell 20 people they can't do it. So we began teaching, and we had probably 4 or 5 weeks of teaching once a week. And then we went on retreat. And I don't know exactly what happened on retreat, except that we had took classes at night, and then we had time for fun and games. And then in the morning, we had more classes, and then we had more time for fun and games. And it was a great retreat. We came back to the church, and the next week, when we met to do our classwork, we walked in to the room and sat down and opened with a prayer, and it was like the rush of the Spirit. And suddenly this group of 40 came together and bonded. It was a marvelous experience. I wish you'd all been there because it's really hard to interpret and to have you understand. But it was the Spirit. The Spirit was there, and we were bonded. And from then on, we knew that. Mary?
Sure. So I was one of the 40 in Lee's class. And then Lee asked me and 3 other people, 3 other women in our church, to teach the second class. We had 20 in our class. We also bonded. What we have found about Stephen Ministry is once you have been Stephen ministers together and trained together and gone through 50 weeks of studying together, you are lifelong friends. And we identify, with our friends that we have had, either that we went to class with or that we taught. We were new in Stephen Ministry, so we stuck really close to what the people in St. Louis said we should do. We didn't veer too far afield because we were new and we were just testing it out. We found that people, almost every person I've ever worked with in Stephen Ministry says, I don't know if I'm helping anybody else, but I've sure learned a lot for myself. Isn't that right, Jerry? Yes. And I think everybody feels like that when they're done. Stephen Ministry skills like listening, for instance. That's the first one you learn is you don't talk to the person you're helping, you listen. And I was a teacher, and so I used that with parents and kids and colleagues, and so these are life skills that you use all through your life. Stephen Ministry is a wonderful program. I hope some of you kids, when you grow up, really want to do this because, and I don't know, can we have kids in Stephen Ministry? We haven't yet.
No, but.
But we could have kids who graduated from high school.
Yes.
Yes.
Schools have something called peer helping. Maybe your school has peer helping. It's a similar thing without the Christian bent to it.
Yeah. Jerry, you want to go next? Yeah, Jerry next.
Okay, well, I stand up to talk. I want to talk about 3 short things. Number one, I want to talk about you young people that are sitting in here. You're our future. And you've got a lot of opportunity, both as you grow up and now. You have a chance to make a difference to your friends. And I would encourage you to think about the Stephen Ministry and ask questions. There's a lady to ask right there. It's something I think that you'll find that will help you deal with your issues. I want you to know there's not one person in this room that hasn't had an issue way bigger than they were. Not one of us. But we all get through it because of our friends and the people around us. And that's what a Stephen minister is to me. Now, second thing, I was asked why I became a Stephen minister. And the truth of the matter is, this is my way of paying God back for all the good things that I've experienced in my life. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, there's been a couple of them that weren't so good. As I say, we all have these. But these are learning experiences. They're a chance to prove that you can do something better than you ever thought you could do. And the benefit of being a Stephen minister for me has been the love, the compassion that the people on the other side have come to show me. And it's why I think everybody in this room should give some thought to being a Stephen minister. I promise you this, and this has already been said. We as Stephen ministers learn more about ourselves in the process of helping other people than you could ever begin to imagine. And second, it makes a difference to those people who need it. And that's probably the most important thing. It makes a difference to them. And this is God's way of helping them through you. You are a force of God. Think about it. That's a big statement. You are a force of God. And we have a responsibility if we're going to be a force of God, to serve God's people.
So I was asked how Stephen ministry has impacted my life and my faith. I can honestly say, being a Stephen minister and going through the classes, it taught me to listen a lot more and just to really hear people. Because a lot of times in conversations, you listen to people, but you're almost listening for an answer for them or for a response. But Stephen ministry teaches you to listen, to just be present for them, just to support them. And I've noticed I've done it a lot just after the class and after being in the program for a while. I do that now with people, with strangers, my friends, my family. I'm just learning to just be present with them. Not really looking for an answer, not really focusing on their issue, but just being there. And also, I would say, patience. It teaches you lots and lots of patience, because when you're caring for someone, you have to wait till they are ready to get over it, to heal themselves, in essence. And I really like the fact that Stephen ministry enables that in all of us. It's almost like qualities that you have, but they almost bring them out or strengthen them if you already have them. And my faith, it's I would say, made my bond with God a lot stronger. It's almost like you kind of just talk and listen to God in a way, instead of always asking for something or looking for results almost too quick, I guess, for lack of a better word. You just learn to just wait on Him and wait on answers and wait on things and wait for Him to show you the way. So it's really helped me, and it's really made me become a lot more gentle when it comes to caring for others and talking to others as well. So.
Okay, one of the things that Jan wanted us to chat about or share was where we've seen, what holy surprises we've seen within the Stephen Ministry program. And myself being on staff for 6 years, I had the honor and the privilege of being involved with a lot of matches, a lot of care receivers and caregivers, and I saw beautiful sharing and helping and caring and friendships formed. But I think that the one moment, the one time that I can say was the most clear that the Holy Spirit was involved in our program, and some of you have heard this story before, some of the Stephen ministers in the group, but I had one care receiver, one gal in our church, who asked me, came to me and said she thought she'd like to have a Stephen minister. She was going to have a surgical procedure. She was kind of worried about it. She didn't have family here in town. She thought a Stephen minister might help her to get past the anxiety that she was facing. So I thought about who would be a good match for her. I got her connected with somebody, and they met, spent time together throughout the course of her procedure and her healing. And then the Stephen minister came to peer support, which is a meeting we have once a month where we all get together and support each other while still being confidential about who we are working with. And she said, well, I think things are good. She's healing, and I think we can, wrap this up and bring closure to this, caregiving relationship. So when I called to check in with the care receiver and ask her, she actually felt a little differently. She, as it turns out, actually had some deeper issues that she was dealing with that brought her the anxiety about the surgery she was having. And she hadn't told me that. I didn't know her well enough to know it. So the person that I had matched her with was maybe not quite the right person for what she was actually dealing with. But she was ready to end her meeting with this particular person. And I said, well, please let me find you somebody else now that I've got a better grasp of some other things that are happening in your life. And she hesitated, and I said, no, let me think about this. And this was on I believe a Friday. And I said, I need to pray about this. I really need to think about what you need and who you need. And so immediately one of my Stephen ministers came to my mind, but she was already in a caregiving relationship, and I was worried. It wasn't, it was kind of towards the end. Maybe it'd been, she'd been with her for a while, but I just felt like doubling down on one Stephen minister seemed like a lot. But that was the only person. That person's name just kept coming to my mind. So I just decided to sit with it and pray about it over the weekend. And my husband and I were out on the golf course the next day. Bill and I were golfing. I always have my phone in my purse in the golf cart. And my phone rang the next day. And I picked it up, and I looked at the name on the phone and was very surprised that it was the Stephen minister who I had been thinking about. And I answered the phone and I said, oh my goodness, hello, how are you? And she said, well, I'm great, but I'm calling you because I just feel like you need me. Do you need me? Is there something that you need me to be doing? And I just could not, see, I get goosebumps every time. I could not believe that she felt the call, that she just knew. And this is a true story. I mean, I was just so shocked. And I said, yes, I've been thinking about you for the last 24 hours, but afraid to call. I called her after I was done golfing, and she ended up being the care receiver or the caregiver that person needed, and saw her through some very difficult times. So, I had never questioned it before, but that absolutely really hit home that God is among us, and God is in this program, and God is with each and every one of us. And when we're open to Him to be there for somebody else, He's going to make it happen. So that was a beautiful moment for me.
Thank you. Does anybody have something they'd like to add before we take questions and answers?
I didn't use part of the information you wanted me to use. I had the privilege of working with a gentleman for a year and a half. And this is an end-of-life situation. These can be very, very, very challenging internally. But at the same time, our conversations that we had, especially over the last 3 months of his life, keep coming back to me. And I thank God that He gave me this opportunity to be of service to this gentleman, because he was a class all to himself. And I can't think of, when I think of him, a smile automatically comes to my face. And these things hurt. I cried, like anyone would, but they weren't tears of anger or hurt. They were tears of knowing that he was going to a better place and not going to have to live with the pain that he was living with, and the missing of the people that he was missing. And at the same time, in a way, they were tears of learning something.
I want to ask you a question. Have you had a problem?
Yes. Like any problem?
Ever?
I can't find. I don't live a perfect life.
Have you talked to a friend about your problem?
Why is everybody looking at me?
Because you answered.
Yeah?
Uh-huh. And has that friend listened to you?
Yes.
Okay.
Do something.
Did that make you feel better?
Yeah?
Okay. That's what a Stephen minister does. There you go.
Pretty just.
I have a question. I have a question. Does anybody know why it's called Stephen Ministry?
Did Stephen started?
No, Stephen? Well, maybe Stephen did start it. St. Stephen the Martyr, as in the school? I don't know. You want to answer? Why is it called Stephen Ministry?
I don't remember the story, except he was stoned, wasn't he?
Well, yeah, but what did he do in his ministry?
I'm just blank.
Stephen was appointed by the church in the first and second, part of the second century, if I'm not mistaken, to take care of the widows, the orphans, and those that were unable to take care of themselves. And that was it. And so his job was to, I'm going to make it seem a little bit more mundane than it probably was, but his job was to raise the money to take care of these people and to make sure they had food and a place to sleep. That's where Stephen Ministry actually started. It was a caring.
So
And
you're right, it was, Stephen did start it.
yeah.
Stephen's
You're
right.
right.
That's what I said. That's what I said.
Sharp as a
I
tack.
knew you had the answer.
I also have one more question for any of you, or any of you Stephen ministers in the audience. What do you do when you don't know what you're doing? What do you do if somebody is in the midst of a problem that you have no clue, or you don't have experience with that problem maybe? You don't know exactly if you're helping them. So what do you do in that situation? How do you feel that you are still being effective? Anybody?
Well, myself personally, I would say you listen. We're trained never to try to solve their problems or give them advice. The minute they say something to us, we shouldn't say, well, you should do this or you should do that. So for me, I would say we listen, we take it all in, we think very carefully before we speak, and we can honestly let them know, this is new for me. And I need to spend some time thinking about this and praying about this, but I'm here for you and I want to be here for you and walk with you while you're going through this. And I'm gonna spend some time praying about this. And then you're gonna go to your group of Stephen ministers at your monthly peer support meeting, and you're gonna chat with them about it a little bit, and that's when you get all those other people that have been trained and so forth that can give you some ideas on if you're stuck or you're in a situation where you're not sure how to move forward or whatnot. So that's where peer support is so amazing. And of course, you would call Jan as well and say that would be your first call, and then bring it to peer support. But that's why we're all here together, and that's why we have monthly peer support meetings, so that we can support each other, give each other fresh ideas, and just kind of be there for one another. So we're kind of each other's Stephen ministers in the midst of the caregiving we give to others.
And you can pray with them. if you gather the information about what they're upset about, you can pray with them. And it's amazing that you may not have any answers, but God does.
That's good.
We would like to open it up for any more questions and answers, and I'll walk around and bring the microphone to you if you have something you'd like to ask or comment. Yes, thank you.
I just have a question to follow. I just have a follow-up to that. Like, there are going to be times when you really don't know what to do, right? Like, let's say it's a situation where you need to bring in professional help for someone's situation. Do you consult with that person about that? How does that work? If it gets to a point where you're like, this is, like, we really need help with this, whether it's abuse or whatever it is.
Thank you. That is an excellent question, and it's one that we do need to address tonight, I think. Would anybody like to tackle it?
Only because the situation that I told you about did turn out to be somebody that was suffering from some depression and had some pretty serious issues. So we are trained when we go through our Stephen Ministry training to be comfortable knowing, okay, we've come to a place where this is more than I'm trained to know what to do. This person needs professional help. They may need professional help immediately. So that's something that you're taught in your Stephen Ministry training. And we always, when we are with a care receiver, that person knows that this is going to be completely confidential. However, we do need to let them know if at any point I feel you're in danger or there's a situation that we need to get more help from, I will be obligated to do that. So we don't ever go to, Jan or one of the ministers without that person's permission unless we feel that they're in danger. If there's a dangerous situation, then that kind of trumps. But it's handled very delicately, and that's something that's covered in the training. But yes, you're never left as a Stephen minister out there to try to figure this all out on your own. The training is amazing, and it gives you a lot of skills and tools that you need so you feel comfortable. Jan is an incredible source of support, and then of course Eric and Chris and the group itself. So you always have people on your team that are there to support you if you run into something like that.
Thank you, Margie. One of the best answers, though, too, in a very, very simple way, and you can use this in your lives now. When you reach a point where you are out of your professional expertise or your friend expertise, the simplest thing sometimes to say, and it's said with love, is the best way I can help you is to get you more help. And that is a loving thing to say. It sometimes sounds a little bit scary to the person receiving it, but it's the truth. And Stephen ministers know that they have boundaries, that when those boundaries are at risk of being obliterated by a professional need that is too consuming, they know exactly what to do. So, yes.
I was just wondering, what is the age? I mean, do you deal with teenagers? Do you just deal with adults? Or if you have a teenager, then do you get the parents involved? I mean, what age is, I'm talking about teenagers. Like, if a teenager was having a problem or whatever, would you guys meet with them and then the parents, or do you do it separately? How does that work?
It's an adult ministry, and it's similar gender. So if we have a male who needs, and asks for a Stephen minister, I need to find a male Stephen minister for that person. But regarding teenagers, the age of consent in Nebraska is 18, so that would be the age at which Stephen ministers could work with somebody. because we need adult consent for this.
It's 19 Yeah, I thought it was 19.
I'm sorry, 19. 19. However, that doesn't mean that Stephen ministers don't work with family issues, but usually it's done through the parent or the concerned party. Yeah.
Is it open to people outside of Countryside?
Good question.
Yes, it is. In fact, right now, Jerry is helping somebody from a whole different church. A church downtown did not have a male Stephen minister ready to help somebody. And so they called us, and Jerry is helping somebody from a different church. And we have a whole other situation. We actually have two situations similar to that right now, where Countryside is helping other people. So yes, we can help anybody. It doesn't have to be a member.
Jan? There have been situations where a church across the country has had a situation and has called, and we've been able to help them. If it's someone who has come to our church from across the country, then we can, we can help them if we know about them. So,
And just one more addition to that, I thought this along the lines of what you're saying. I've heard of situations where somebody, for example, that lives in Omaha and traveled to a city across the country because their child was going and had to be in a medical facility for an extended period of time, then their church here could reach out to a sister church in the other city and have somebody at the other end waiting for them to support them through that process as well. So yeah, it goes all over.
So this is an international program. It started in the United States, started in St. Louis. A Lutheran pastor was overwhelmed with his job. His wife was ill with cancer, and he actually didn't have enough time in the day to help his congregation, to preach, to do pastoral care, and to help his wife. So he basically, through sheer necessity, developed a lay ministry or a peer support program, and that's how it started in 1986 in St. Louis.
To the question about teenagers, Stephen Ministry does have a wealth of information about other programs that a teenager could plug itself into. So in that regard, it wouldn't be a one-on-one peer situation, but it would be a resource for you.
Good point. Any other questions? Will has one.
It sounds like a big part of the job is listening. How is it that listening is that big of a deal?
The youth pastor has that question. I don't know.
It is surprisingly challenging to listen when you are wanting to solve.
Yes.
Our natural tendency is to solve people's problems because we want to be helpful, but actually then they don't have ownership, do they? Want to say that something, Christy? Christy's a Stephen minister.
Yeah, I just went through the program this last year. One of the beautiful things about Stephen Ministry, I think, is that you get to talk to somebody who's outside of your personal bubble, and that kind of allows you to open up a little bit more. Because the people that you're talking to aren't your friends or your mom or your dad or whoever, the people that are... So sometimes when something happens, you feel like you need to be strong for those people, or you're maybe embarrassed or ashamed about your feelings that you're having, even though those feelings are very real, right? So to have somebody that is from outside of that bubble makes it, allows it so that you can open up to that person in a safe space. So I think that's one of the neatest things about Stephen Ministry. So just to clarify, for everybody who doesn't know, Jan, can you speak to the different issues maybe that people will come to Stephen Ministry needing help with?
All of us could do that. I'll start and then I'll just pass the microphone down. A lot of times life is full of changes and transitions, so people going through divorce is is actually a significant reason for people to reach out for a Stephen minister. A death in the family, an illness, or a worry about an illness, whether it be your own or a family member's. Oftentimes in our congregation has a lot of older people, and many times we have sad people who have lost their spouses. So a lot of our Stephen ministers are actually helping those who are recently grieving the loss of a spouse. So I'll just pass it on down for anybody else that wants to add other issues that you know would be helpful.
Actually, it's almost limitless on what you can get involved in. There are times when all of us just feel overwhelmed, where we feel like every decision we've made here lately is wrong. Those are times when a Stephen minister can be of help and help at the same time help you rebuild your own self-confidence.
One thing that we've done in our group, I remember, we helped some people who were aging and needed to get rid of their homes and move into a different facility, and that's really traumatic for everybody around them, and so you can work with people who are in age transition too.
Well, if you've had a problem and been able to solve it through someone helping you, you have to understand that there is no one who has more authority than the wounded healer. So if you had a problem and you're better because someone helped you, then you have the authority because of that to help someone else.
Honestly, I think everyone pretty much covered it, but it's just anybody going through a change or needing to entrust in someone that you don't know.
Yeah, a lot of the things have been talked about. A couple others, an abusive relationship, drug or alcohol addiction. There's just so many, but one thing that I would want to stress is that, there were numerous times when I would reach out to somebody that maybe I knew was struggling with someone and just remind them about our Stephen Ministry program, as I'm sure that Jan is now doing, and let them know that that was a resource available to them. And more often than I can tell you, I would hear, oh my gosh, there are people that need a Stephen minister way more than I do, I'm sure. People tend to downplay what they're going through. Maybe their good friend went through a similar situation and they seem to breeze right through it. We all handle grief and change and upset in our lives differently. So what maybe somebody else is telling you, oh, get over it, or oh, move on, or oh, it'll get better, just give it some time. Everyone handles things differently. So just because your neighbor, got through her divorce and didn't seem to be too, upset or didn't seem to struggle, you might be feeling like you're drowning in it, or whatnot. So don't base your decision on whether to reach out on what someone else tells you or what someone else has experienced. And the thing about listening, Will, just to touch back to that a little bit, Lee, you were asking the kids here if they've ever had a problem or talked to a friend. And, I've so many times I've heard Stephen ministers tell me that the training made me a better friend, a better spouse, a better coworker, a better neighbor, a better mother or father, because it does teach you to think more before you speak and not to speak as often. And so, as a friend, if your best friend says, oh my gosh, so-and-so did this to me and I'm so upset and what should I do? And your best friend's gonna say, oh girl, you need to do this or that or whatnot. A Stephen minister isn't gonna do that. A Stephen minister is gonna say, I'm sorry you were hurt. What do you think you need to do to get past that? How can you move on? What do you need? So there's a little bit of a difference, and the training teaches us that.
I love the sermon series now, I Call You Friends. And one of the reasons that we thought it would be appropriate to have Stephen Ministry through the years tonight, not only is it our 30th, but also it fits this sermon series. And with that, I guess I would just like to say, are there any more questions or comments? Mary, do you want to say anything about your work through, do you want to talk about that? So this is Mary Watke, and she's a Stephen minister. She's also Countryside's funeral coordinator. So she helps families when they are very stressed, very sad, and often bewildered about how to honor their loved one.
I've just been doing this now for about, I don't know, 6 months. It's very, very rewarding. Everybody has the same problems. If you're going through, if you've just been, whether someone has been sick for a long time and you think you're expecting their death, but how you feel is, I'm ready for them to die, but not today. I lost my husband about 1.5 years ago. Margie was a great help. I just kind of left it to my children and bowed out and he was a 23-year Parkinson patient. We certainly knew that the death was coming, but that's what we decided we felt. You know, it's time, it's a good thing, but not today. So I just try to give this sense to other people that it's okay. It's okay to grieve in whatever way you need to. It's never easy, doesn't matter what's going on, the death just pulls your legs out from underneath you. So it's just been a really rewarding experience just to be able to give them a little guidance. We just go through the bones of it, you know, just let's get through the details and the rest will be okay. And somehow it is. So it's been my pleasure.
Thank you, Mary. Anybody else? Amy, do you have anything you want to add, or David? Tom? You have anything you want to add? Betsy? Okay.
I know that there are other churches in the area that have Stephen ministry programs. Maybe can you identify some or how many? Give a general picture of the metro area. Pat?
We were one of the first churches who began Stephen ministry. Countryside was one of the first churches in Omaha to begin Stephen ministry. So I am not, I don't know what the picture is today. Maybe Jan does.
But all denominations do it.
All denominations.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yes. I think there are about 45 churches in the metro area that have Stephen ministry programs. They have meetings every so often with leaders so that we can get together and share what's happening, who's doing what for training, is somebody sending leaders to national training, stuff like that. I just want to thank you for your attention tonight, and if you do want to talk more about this, my office is downstairs by the gym. I'd love to talk to any of you about it. If you feel that you might benefit from having a Stephen minister or going through training, I'd love to talk to you about that as well. And we kept talking tonight about something called peer support, which is the monthly meeting where Stephen ministers come to gather support for what their work is. And remember, they don't share names. No one knows who's helping whom except me. And I'm not going to tell anybody. So peer support is not something that you have to worry about. It's not a gossip session. We don't sit around and talk about, you know, whether or not Josie was really good that week. We don't use names. And so therefore it's confidential and it's helpful to those. I believe really, really strongly that we need to help our helpers. And peer support is a way of helping the helpers. But thank you so much, Margie, Nolan, Lee, Mary, and Jerry. Thank you.